Well, good morning. Happy Wednesday. It is Wednesday, September 18th, 2024. And thank you so much for joining me. It's a beautiful day. Actually, it was really cold outside. It was 64 degrees outside this morning. So that's starting to get into the area where it's starting to get cold for me. So if you go outside this morning and you enjoy the day, it's because it started out really cold. I have no idea what the high is going to be today. But it probably won't be too much longer before the high will be tolerable. October, November, December, January, February, March, April, those 6, 7 months, really quite enjoyable. I mean, outside of that, it's enjoyable in the morning, but this is why we live in Southern Arizona. I think I found out yesterday that the Hohokam Indians, I don't know if you know about the Hohokam, but they lived in Phoenix. They were the tribe that lived in Phoenix a couple thousand years ago. And there was some sort of event, a drought or something, that caused all the Hohokams to leave. And what I found out yesterday when I was talking to somebody is that there may have been like a tectonic shift of like an earthquake or something like that may have drained all the aquifers. Apparently, quite a long time ago, if you drilled down 30 feet, you reached water in Tucson. But some cataclysmic event happened and you have to go like 600 feet or something like that. Maybe it was more population. I have no idea, but it was really fascinating. And you can't know. I mean, these are all suppositions about what it was like and how they did agriculture here in the Tucson area. But apparently the Hohokams were here because the person I was talking to is a videographer that was videoing the canal system of the Hohokams in northwest Tucson, which I didn't even know the Hohokams were in Tucson. I thought they were just in Phoenix. So that was really fascinating. We learned about the Hohokams when I was growing up in Phoenix because when the settlers came in the 1800s into Phoenix, which was then called Pumpkinville, and they wanted to bring water into Phoenix, all they had to do is redig the canals that the Hohokams had already built. I mean, they didn't have to lay them out or anything. They just kind of cleared them out a little bit. So the work that the Hohokams did, they left as a legacy for Phoenix. And of course, now Phoenix has 5 million people, 4 million people or something like that. And Tucson will also. You just should know the projection is for Tucson that by 2050, so how long ago is that? It's 25 years from now, that we will increase by 500,000 people. And just think about that. We're going to increase in size by 50% over the next. Well, this report was from a few years ago, but you have to know that somebody somewhere is actively planning where all those people are going to go. Westcor was planning 12,000 acres. I used to work for Westcor, consultant for Westcor back in my Phoenix days. And they had a contract with the state land department to turn 12,000 acres of land kind of between I-19 and I-10, the southeast portion of Tucson, to put in, how many people can you put in 22,000 acres or 12,000 acres of land? A lot, but not enough, right? I mean, even if you put in, like cram them in 3-4 per acre, you're talking about 12,000 acres. You're talking about 50,000 people. Well, we need 5 times that many. We need 500,000 people to accommodate the growth that's coming. And it is coming. No, we can prevent growth. Good luck on that. How are you going to prevent the growth? You can't. All right. So let's see. No birthdays today. And I can't even actually get into it, but I remember the next birthday was on the 21st. So we've got three days. Let's see. Beautiful day. Yeah, let's get into our study. This should be an interesting study. We are in 2 Kings chapter 12, and we have a good king. His name is Joash, and he wants to rebuild the temple, or at least fix it up. And so he put in an offering. He had the priests collect the money, and then the priests collected the money, and they didn't do anything because they're priests. So Joash, after a period of time, says, wait a minute, what's going on? I allowed you to collect all this money, and you've done nothing. So instead, they put a box next to the altar, and they filled up the box with 3 types of offerings. And once the box was full, then they gave this to the laborers to repair the temple. And we're still in the middle of that story. And so let's continue reading in verse 13. The money brought into the temple was not spent for making silver basins, wick trimmers, sprinkling bowls, trumpets, or any other articles of gold or silver for the temple of the Lord. It was paid to the workers who used it to repair the temple. They did not require an accounting from those to whom they gave the money to pay the workers because they acted with complete honesty. The money from the guilt offerings and sin offerings was not brought into the temple of the Lord. It belonged to the priest. So the money from the guilt offerings and the sin offerings was not brought into the temple of the Lord. It belonged to the priest. So there seems to be a division of the money that comes in. The original, let's see if I can find this again. The money collected from the census, from personal vows, and brought voluntary into the temple, that money was used to repair the temple. But the money that was brought for guilt offerings and sin offerings, that actually went to the priest. So Joash seems to have actually done some leadership here. What do I mean by that? One of the responsibilities of a leader, of a king, is to look around your kingdom and say, what needs to be fixed? What needs to be repaired? And he goes around and he sees that the temple needs to be repaired. So he tells the priests, repair the temple. And they say, okay, we'll do it. Well, and after a period of time, it's not happening. So Joash goes back to the priests and says, listen, whatever you're doing, it's not working. So we're going to put up a box. We're going to have these 3 offerings go in the box. That's going to go to the workers to repair the temple. This other offering, the sin offering, the guilt offering, we'll let that go to you. And he starts apportioning where the money that comes into the temple, how it's apportioned and how it maintains the temple. And that's leadership, right? That's good leadership, saying this needs to be done, this needs to be done, you do this, and we'll get this taken care of. Leaders do this. Leaders look around and they say, what's not working? And they get it fixed. And they bring the people together. They excite the people. We're in a study in Nehemiah, and Nehemiah was a great leader. He goes to the king and says, we need to fix the walls around the temple in Jerusalem. And he gets permission from the king. He goes back and he gathers the people. And he says, okay, you build this part of the wall, you build this part of the wall, you build this part of the wall, and it gets done. And why is this so important? Because a lot of people, and I don't mean this as as necessarily saying that they're evil, but people lead their own lives, right? They've got issues, they've got family, they've got dinner to cook, all these different, clothes to wash, children to raise, all the different things that encroach upon the life of a person. They just don't have time to stop and pause and say, what needs to be repaired? We have here in Vail a post office. And it's been in disrepair for a very, very long time. I think, I'm going to say in the 50s was maybe the last time that anybody ever used it for anything. And then it's kind of sat for 70 years on this property. And it took a group of people and some leadership, and they came together and they said, let's repair the post office. Let's find out how we get the money to repair the post office, and let's repair it. And as I sit here today, I'm so impressed with that leadership because the post office, the foundation has been repaired. And now it's a good, strong, solid foundation. The adobe walls still need some work on it, but they're not going to fall apart now. And the roof has been sealed, at least. It still has a tin roof that needs to go on it, but it won't be too long before this post office that was going to completely fall down is going to be repaired, and it'll be something that could be used, hopefully will be used to be, an addition to our community, to our Vail community. And it takes leadership to do that. And most people just, they drive by and they say, well, that's an eyesore, but there's nothing I can do about it. But it's amazing when you get people together and they say, we're going to get this fixed, and they get it fixed. And so leadership is a gift from God, I guess, is the bottom line. And Nehemiah is a leader, and Joash is a leader. And every once in a while, you'll find people who are leaders that they just see things that need to be fixed and they fix it. And we should thank God for those people because they are a gift. That's what Joash does. Okay, but I want to get into something else, so I got to finish reading. Verse 17. About this time, Hazael, king of Aram, went up and attacked Gath and captured it. Then he turned to attack Jerusalem. But Joash, king of Judah, took all the sacred objects dedicated by his predecessors, Jehoshaphat, Jehoram, Ahaziah, the king of Judah, and the gifts he himself had dedicated, and all the gold found in the treasuries of the temple of the Lord and the royal palaces, and he sent them to Hazael, king of Aram, who then withdrew from Jerusalem. So if you're going to have somebody conquer your village, you could fight the war. Or the other thing you could do is you could say, okay, how do we pay him off? And Joash, this is also extremely good leadership, because if you lose the war, you're going to lose everything anyway, right? If you win the war, you're going to get the spoils of war, but do you really need those spoils of war? I mean, if most people are happy with the life they have, do they really want to go and conquer other lands? So Joash, who is king, he hears that Aram, the king of Aram, is going to come attack him, and he weighs the odds. He considers, okay, if they attack me, I might lose, and I'm going to lose everything anyway. If they attack me, I might win, but now I've got an enemy, and we're going to be at war forever. And Joash considers all this, and he says, well, what happens if I go and just take all the wealth that I can find and give it to Aram? We may not have all that wealth, but at least we'll have our lives, and maybe we'll make a friend with Aram, the king of Aram. I don't know, but he takes a chance, and he goes and he gathers up all the wealth, and he gives it to the king of Aram, and the king of Aram is like, yeah, all right, fine, I'm not going to attack you. This is, I know it seems like blackmail, and it doesn't seem right, but this tells me that not Aram, but Joash is a pretty decent king, because he weighs the things, he does good leadership decisions. This to me is something actually I would have done, or at least try to do. Is there any way possible to get out of this war? Because in war, nobody ever wins, ever. If you've ever been sued, some of the companies I worked for in the past were sued, and you have a lawsuit, and you know who wins in the lawsuit? Nobody. The lawyers win in the lawsuit. Even if you win the lawsuit, you had to spend a lot of time and money. I mean, sometimes lawsuits are inevitable. I understand that, but they're almost like a legal war. Basically, they're a legal war. Nobody's killed, but when you finally go to a lawsuit, it's basically a war, and nobody wins a war. If there's any way possible to try to avoid a lawsuit, you should. If somebody's suing you or you're about to sue somebody, sit down with them, talk about it, communicate, let your position be heard. See if you can do anything else other than a lawsuit, because once it goes to a lawsuit, it does become war. And the only people that win in a war is the lawyers. And once you start a war, you absolutely have no idea where it's going to end. You really don't. It could drag on for a long, long, long time. I mean, just look at the wars the United States has. That started. You know, we've gotten into these wars, and you can't stop them. Don't start a war. It takes It takes 1,000 times more energy to stop a war than it does just to continue fighting it. And then pretty soon everybody there's no resources, there's no people. I mean, there's no land, there's nothing left to defend. So I'm impressed with Joash. I really am. First of all, he sees the temple and says it needs to be rebuilt, and he gets that going. And then he fights the king of Aram. He gets that going. Let me just finish Joash, and then I want to talk about something. Verse 19. As for the other events of the reign of Joash and all he did, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Judah? His officials conspired against him and assassinated him at Beth Millo on the road down to Silla. The officials who murdered him were Jozabad, son of Shimeath, and Jehozabad, the son of Shomer. He died and was buried with his ancestors in the city of David, and Amaziah, his son, succeeded him as king. So, and this isn't too surprising because generals want to fight wars. That's why they exist. And since he tried to avoid war and sue for peace, right, to give treasuries of the kingdom to avoid war, of course his generals are going to be like, we could have won that war. Give us a shot at it. And eventually they overthrew him. And now they have the opportunity to get a new leader, and maybe this new leader will be different from the old leader. All right, I want to go back to this whole thing about the temple. You know, putting a box in the temple with coins in the box and all that sort of thing. One of the how do I phrase this? There's always this belief that the church should never ever concern itself with things of what I call the left-hand kingdom. The left-hand kingdom, the right-hand kingdom is the things of God, right? Spiritual, the Holy Spirit, pureness, all those sort of things. The left-hand kingdom is just, first order stuff. Making sure the buildings are repaired. You know, you have a church, and at some level, you got to pay the water bill. You got to pay the property taxes if you're paying property tax. You got to pay the electric bill. I mean, there's just some administrative stuff that has to be done in a church. And it is easy to lull yourself into belief that all a church has to worry about is the spiritual things. And that is not true. There is another side of a church that has to be taken care of, and it's the business aspect of a church. And people don't like the business aspect of the church, and they want to minimize it as much as possible and wash their hands of it and say that's dirty and all that sort of thing. And I think that, years and years and years ago, it was maybe possible to have a church that could completely pull itself out of the world and just exist. Maybe they had their own well, maybe they didn't have a well, but maybe they used hand labor to get the water up out of the well. You know, there's no property tax on it. I mean, and then all the things that a church did could be handled by the labor of the people in the church. So it really could be isolated, almost like the Amish, right? Isolated from the world. They never interact with the world. And the great thing about that is that your church can stay, I don't want to say pure, but kind of unaffected from the world around it, right? It's this little enclave that isolates itself from the world, and they can do whatever they want because they're isolated from the world. We don't live in that world anymore. But what I mean by that is we have water bills, we have electric bills, a church has to create a corporation in order to exist. So you have to develop a corporation, get it through the corporation commission. You have to get a checking account. I mean, all these different things to interact with the world. The church a church today, there's no way for a church not to interact with the world. And whenever you interact with the world, then somebody at the church has to make the decisions as to how they're going to interact with the world. And I believe that's the role that Paul put in place whenever he developed a church or started a church. The church in Galatia, the church in Lydia. He always created somebody who was called the overseer. It's a Greek word that means someone's in charge. And to me, the overseer is the CEO, or the person that's looking out for the business of the church. And that's a hard position for anybody because they've got the spiritual aspect, but they've also got the business aspect. And so if you look at Paul, his letters to Timothy, whoever's in that role has to be very spiritually mature. They have to have a good business sense, all those different things. And this is what I see in Joash. Like Joash is king, but he knows that there's a spiritual aspect to the temple, but he knows that there's also a business aspect to the temple. I remember when I was elder at a church in Denver, and we were struggling with something. And one of the people in our congregation said, and while we were struggling, we pulled up a book, a leadership book. And I can't remember what the leadership book was. But someone in the congregation says, why are we bringing leadership books into the congregation? We shouldn't do that. We're a church, and the church should only concern itself with spiritual matters. And back then, I was too young and wet behind the ears, in spiritual or in church leadership to have a response. But today, my response is, how can the church not have a business aspect? It has to. Because we interact with the world. And if we don't interact well with the world will crush us. We have to be on top of our game. We have to read some leadership books and find out how we can do things. I mean, the church we're not Amish. We don't have 50 acres of land out in the middle of nowhere where we can draw a boundary around it and say, you don't come in here and we don't go out there. And Jesus doesn't want us to do that. He wants us to interact with the world. He wants us to interact with the world well. And that's the only reason I bring this up is because I felt in my heart like this person was like, and I agree. I mean, I'd love to have a church that doesn't interact with the world, but it's easier. It's less messy. But Jesus likes messiness, right? He wants us to get our hands dirty. He wants us to go out and talk to the world and make disciples and get our hands dirty. I just didn't have the words back then, but in my heart, I felt like that was the truth. Anyway, all right. So Joash, I don't know. Maybe if we went into Chronicles, we might find something different about Joash. But I'm impressed with him. I think of all the kings past David and Solomon that I've seen so far in Jerusalem, the one that impresses me the most is Joash. And it says he started out as a good king, but he ended up as a bad king. I don't know. I think he started as a good king and did as good as he can. I really do. So he will go down in my book as a guy on the correct side of the ledger, I guess, is what I will say. And maybe I'll do a sermon series on Joash and there's not much here, but there's enough here to paint a picture of a guy who really seems to be a fairly decent king. And I like Joash. That's all I can say. I like Joash. And he died. His people killed him. And that's also how you know that, people don't kill you if you're just going along to get along. People kill you when you're actually doing something that's going to make people uncomfortable, and because leadership is hard. And, if you do something, if you step out in faith and do something, you're going to have people that are not going to be happy. So the fact that he was murdered, who knows? I mean, I really could do a sermon series on this, and actually might be kind of fun. All right, we're going to leave Joash from now, and let's close in prayer. Dear God, thanks for this beautiful day, and thanks for Joash and his example. Help us to learn good things from it. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, let's see. No, now that my mom insists live here along with Jennifer Hook's parents. We don't want more people. Yeah, isn't that the truth? You can't stop it. You cannot. I mean, that was, so I'll just tell you a little brief. I got a minute here. I grew up in Phoenix. Phoenix had 1 million people when I was born. And they tried to do everything to stop people moving to Phoenix. I mean, they said, you know, we're not going to build the Cliff Dam. There was a big Cliff Dam that they wanted to build, and they said we're going to stop the growth. We're not going to have any growth in Phoenix. And they tried everything. The federal government came in and built the CAP canal and said the growth is coming and you need water. So we're going to force you to build this canal and get water from the Colorado River and allow Phoenix to grow. And so they did. And Phoenix is now what? Almost 4 to 5 million people. Yeah, there's not a whole lot that you can do to stop growth. There really isn't. And you can either plan for it and plan well, or you don't plan for it and it just becomes a nightmare. But you can't stop it. I guess if you create such a horrible community that nobody wants to move here, then you could stop the growth. I mean, that'd be one way to do it. To not plan for it at all, and the conditions get so bad and the traffic's so bad nobody wants to move there. That's one way. So I don't know. Yeah, but I like my Vale. I like it the way it is. I don't want it to grow. But I just don't know if there's a way to stop it. Phoenix couldn't stop it. Let me put it that way. Phoenix did everything they could. And finally they threw their hands up and said, okay, let's build freeways at least. So we have better traffic conditions. And it is really nice, the freeway system. That was my first job out of college, was working on the freeway system of Phoenix. We worked on the 303, the outer loop. We did the environmental impact study on it. What was it? The route corridor location environmental impact study is what we did. And we preserved the land, and then they built the freeway. And that was 40 years ago. All right. Oh, man, that was a long time ago. Yeah, 40 years is a long time. Okay, I think I'll leave it there. And the 202 is great. Yes. Yeah, and the 303 is even better. All right. So, hey, have a great day. And I thank you so much for joining me. And we will talk to you tomorrow. Take care. Bye.